There it is. There it is, that classic wax brought to you by the Beat Sessions. I'm your host, Mitchell Weary. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you're having a fantastic week so far. We're talking about David Bowie again. I know that I wasn't feeling well last week. We shifted the day. It happened to coincide with the release of Black Star. I was trying not to talk about Steve Winwood too much. I can always talk about David Bowie too much, I think. It's an honor to be able to talk about Low tonight. We're looking at his the beginning of the Berlin Trilogy, released January 14th, 1977. A fascinating record, a record that it signals a lot of new phases, not just for Bowie, but I think for music in general as a whole. What this record brings to the table as far as the production of sound, just the idea of production in general, is completely upended and reinvented with this record. So really excited to talk about Low. If you're not familiar with the show or with the channel, Classic Wax is a once-a-week celebration where we dip back and look at a record. A couple caveats: it must be released on the day that we do the show. It is January 14th, so we fall right where we need to with that category. The other thing is that the record must be 20 years or older. We want to look at records that have fallen into that category of being classic, so to speak, of having had the time to have an influence, have an impact. And David Bowie's Low certainly falling into the categorization there. An incredible record that is, again, you think about the way it influenced post-punk. Just think of bands like Joy Division, the song Warsawa. It's a wild one amongst many others on this project. For those of you new to the channel as well, please like this video, share it, subscribe, do all the things to help me blow this project up in 2025. Please feel free to send me a chat, throw down your thoughts into the chat. Happy to reply to anything. Happy to check any type of any type of super chats. Those are always welcome. And yeah, don't be shy if you feel like contributing, if you have any information to throw down as well. The idea with this show too is to cover some of the other things that I've been talking about this week on the channel. Talking about Franz Ferdinand, we'll just kick in right with those guys. Their new record, The Human Fear, they released that on January 10th. A band that very consistent over the years. I definitely appreciate what this outfit brings to the table. Their style in and of itself is pretty unique. You could simply label them as indie rock or alternative rock, but there's this influence of, it feels predominantly Russian, but I would say there's a lot of Eastern and Central European influence to their sound, to their aesthetic, to everything about this band and what they bring to the table with their sound. So their sixth record, very much working within that scope, and it's a fun album. It's certainly lots of great hooks, great melodies, fun, upbeat. They've certainly, as far as carving out their niche, I love the dance pop, the dance punk feel to their sound. It's always super upbeat, super infectious. It's a sound that it makes you want to move, and so I love that about these guys. This new record, unfortunately, The Human Fear, while I love thematically what it's doing, it's exploring the idea of the limitations that we feel, that we harbor when we face things with doubt, with uncertainty. And the idea behind the record, the spirit of it, is to overcome those fears. It's the thing that makes us feel the most alive. We are always attempting to transcend the physical limitations of our bodies, right? We're always trying to do things, whether it's emotionally trying to step outside of that, where it's physically, flying down a hill on a snowboard or jumping out of an airplane with a parachute. There's all these things that we do to enhance the human experience in a way of almost, again, transcending it. And so I like what's at the core thematically of this record, talking about those things, love, pursuing a new career, again, like all the exciting stuff, but all the stuff that ultimately from time to time brings fear about. And I think the big drive behind that fear too is is caring. I think there's a big part of just genuinely giving a shit when it comes to being scared about stuff. I think people at the end of the day, they want to perform well to the utmost of their abilities, and it's I'm one of those people that I think that every day you wake up, the idea is to put yourself in a position, in a situation where you can feel this emotion, where you can feel this intensity, and you can feel it push you to be the best human being that you can possibly be. With that said, though, the music, it does lack ingenuity. It feels like this band has, stayed in their pocket for a number of decades now, and really not branching out too much, really not making too much of an effort to mix up their style, to be experimental, and that's okay. There's something to be said about consistency. There's something to be said about putting out music that is always going to strike the chord with your fan base. Their sound, unfortunately, it's never been enough for me to really become a diehard. I'm sure I'm a fan of lots of bands like this, but for some reason, Franz Ferdinand has just never quite struck that chord hard enough for me. But I do believe that this album is worth the listen. It's a hot run. It's about 37 minutes, 11 songs, so it's nothing that you have to invest a ton of time in to experience. And I think ultimately these songs, they will catch you. You will find them easy to listen to and fun to listen to. I think where this album falls short, though, is, will there be a desire 6 months from now, a year from now, to throw this record on, to revisit that energy? And I just don't know if it quite gets there. But it is worth a shot. It is worth checking out. I think that talking about the duel of the albums this week, try to highlight the first two that I talk about. The new review for the Ringo Starr record, Look Up, is on its way out. It's rendering right now. I should have that posted here shortly after this show is finished. This is a fun record, though, and this is a record that finds Ringo Starr going back 55 years almost to his second solo record, Beaucoup de Blues. It's a record that it finds him really exploring the country western vibe. I'll just keep it simple there. It's got a number of great collaborations on it. I really love him working with T-Bone Burnett, amongst many others on this record. But Alison Krauss showing up to contribute on this record. I really love... and pull up more of the track list here for you real quick. Really love Billy Strings, the work that he's doing with Molly Tuttle. Their voices come together really nice. Ringo's got that signature baritone. He's got a voice that is very unique and very one of a kind, but limited in some regards. So bringing aboard someone like Molly Tuttle to enhance that vocal is, I love that element of the record. I love his exploration of all things country western. There's definitely bits of rockabilly. There's definitely just a big homage to Americana as a whole. I don't think this is a record that's breaking down any musical barriers or moving the country western genre in a new direction, but it highlights two collaborators in Ringo and T-Bone Burnett, surrounded by a number of excellent players, new and old alike, that are just bringing good energy to the studio, to the Ringo vibe in general. I think Ringo at 84 years old is one of those figures out in the world that continues to shed that message of peace and love. And I'm always going to be a fan as long as he's out there spreading that message and doing his thing, creating music that is joyful, that celebrates life. Ultimately, I think that's the big drive behind this record. And again, while he's not venturing into new territory per se, this is territory that he hasn't ventured into for a very long time. And I think he's crushing it. And I think at this point in his career, this is just a fun addition to a catalog that is pretty stellar. That's extensive too. I mean, 21 records. in his solo career. You know, we got a roughly like a 54 year time frame. So I mean, he's putting one out about every 2 to 3 years. It's fairly prolific. So props to Ringo. I would say that Look Up is definitely the better album of the week, more so than The Human Fear, but both worth your time, both worth your energy, and I think make for a pretty solid opening week into January. Now, getting into our topic for tonight, an artist who really decided to change things up with this record, Low. If you're not familiar with it, it's the first installment of the Berlin series. David Bowie is just not in a great place in his life when this record is in its inception. Working with Tony Visconti on this record. I love the collaboration there. This is where David starts to befriend Brian Eno and to work with him. That'll become one of the signature collaborative efforts with this trilogy. But this time period in the mid-'70s puts out young Americans station to station, heavily addicted to cocaine. His life really is in shambles, and he reflects on that in interviews a bit afterwards in the 90s, saying that if he hadn't changed his lifestyle, if he hadn't made the decisions that he had, who even knows if he would have made it through that decade. So I know personally, I'm glad to see that David Bowie made this decision along with good friend Iggy Pop. They both retreat to France and first work on The Idiot, even though it's very interesting. It's I love hearing the talk over the years, people that argue that that's really the first installment of the Berlin series. It's not a trilogy. It gets bigger than that. But David Bowie's work with Iggy Pop, inspiring and really acting as the first steps towards this direction where he's heavily influenced by electronic music and the sounds that are coming out of Germany. Think of bands like Kraftwerk, Tangerine Dream, New, Harmonia. And the big thing with this record too is the unique sounds that you're hearing on this thing, especially Tony working with the Eventide H910 harmonizer, totally upending the tone of the drums, creating something that was totally new and has been since then. I mean, there's been so many artists, so many bands that have replicated that sound. In the beginning, there was the effort to try to replicate it. Ultimately, people figured out what was going on and how to get there. But I love I love the story with the drum sound. And David Bowie asked Tony Visconti, he asked what it does. And Visconti replies, "It fucks with the fabric of time." I love that response. But he goes on to say, talking to David Buckley, a biographer, he says, "My brain nearly exploded when I found what I could do with drums working with this mechanism." He fed the pitch-altered sound back into the device, creating an infinite dropping of the pitch, ever renewing itself. And I mean, just from the moment that this album opens up, songs, Speed of Life, Breaking Glass, I mean, you can hear what is going on with the drums, the unique nature of them, unlike anything else prior to this time. And so I love that about it. I love that David Bowie, I mean, really coming to grips with the problematic nature of his lifestyle, of his behavior. He talks about Paul Buckmaster and the soundtrack that he wanted to put together for The Man Who Fell to Earth. David Bowie starred in it. He felt like he was under the obligation that it was his responsibility to do this. And so his frustration stems from the fact that there was a number of other composers that were asked to submit work, and Bowie just took it so personal, took it as an affront, and said, to hell with this, you're not going to get it. And eventually he ends up sending a letter to the film's director, Nicholas Roeg, with a copy of Low. And he says, "This is what I wanted to do for the soundtrack. It would have been a wonderful score, but it was just not in the cards." Bowie needing to retreat to France and ultimately to Germany to clean up and to get his life back together. So working with Iggy Pop, they record The Idiot, and then Low becomes the goal, and getting Low out before the release of The Idiot. I think there was definitely this angle from David Bowie's perspective where he didn't want people thinking that he was feeding off of Iggy Pop. You know, he wanted people to know that what was going on with his record, his sound, and with Iggy's new sound was based in his artistic ingenuity, so to speak. And so teaming up with Carlos Alomar on guitar, George Murray on the bass, really dig what he was doing. Dennis Davis, who, interesting his contributions, working with the new device to get the drums to that tone. And, eventually he did catch on the idea of seeing what Bowie was ultimately trying to do with this avant-garde piece of work. Got Roy Young on the keys there, Ricky Gardner playing guitar as well, and then the cover by George Underwood. The whole idea of Low, that image coming from the film, The Man Who Fell to Earth, and again, visually not trying to necessarily promote the film, but creating an image that ties the album to that work. It's kind of a fine line to walk there, but I think that these guys were successful in executing that vision. The album cover is iconic. I think that you could have just taken a simple enough picture of Bowie with that profile, stuck it on the album, and called it a day. But I think the particular nature of the artwork, the way that it ties in with the film, is one of the special things about this record. And I love the frustration that it creates for record executives. RCA delays the original release, citing that this is an album that is distinctly unpalatable for the Christmas market, end quote. It's really hilarious verbiage. I've always found that to be quite hilarious. What is and is not palatable for the Christmas market. This is a record that I think that most Bowie fans, when they heard it for the first time, went, what the hell? What is going on? But as the years have gone on, as we've continued to listen to more music, to see the way that this album has influenced artists, people, again, the direction that Iggy Pop took with his career. I feel like without Low, we don't see Joy Division really realize their full potential, even in that short time span. I mean, we never really see Joy Division realize its full potential. But I think that as far as Ian Curtis and that band's artistry, this record, there's so much of what they were trying to do rooted in the avant-garde nature of this album, especially the tracks on the back half. And there's certainly the front half of the album, which is fascinating in and of its own right. A lot of critics argue that the experimental nature of this record, what it was trying to do, led to a really tight first half of tracks that all seem unfinished. They all seem short. They don't seem complete, which is, it's an interesting perspective to take. And there's certainly moments, I think, a song like Breaking Glass for me is a song that could do more. But there is the argument that in not doing more, does it realize its full potential in limiting that, in being that tight, focused composition, using those terms loosely, because there is still the frenzied element to it. There is still the chaotic nature of what is going on with this experimentation, with the noise and everything there. But I just, at the end of the day, I love what this album did as far as not just pushing David Bowie's music forward, but pushing music forward in general. Artists like, you can talk about artists like Nine Inch Nails. You can talk about, again, artists like Joy Division. Talk about the Human League, Arcade Fire. There's, Gang of Four. There's so many. I think of contemporary bands like, Fontaine's DC, what they're doing. This is a record that Radiohead. How could I forget Radiohead? Sorry, I'm like trying to. Stuff just keeps firing off. There's especially a number of moments as far as the synth techniques, some of the droning elements, stuff that is there that I can't imagine. I can't imagine Radiohead going through the '90s without this record and the influence that it had on Tom York and company. But you're talking about that drum sound influence on artists like Phil Collins, Duran Duran, The Cure, TV on the radio. I mean, they just the list goes on and on for what this record did. So getting into its track listing, Speed of Life, opens up this record. Trippy sci-fi synths. I love the simple groove in the bass. Does this little walk from time to time, so I love that back and forth, keeping with the simple riff and then just kind of walking on the turn to bring it back. Drums are immediately mind-blowing, as I said. Really just stealing the show, that sound that is unlike anything else that you've ever heard on earth, and it blows you away from the moment that this song starts, and it just takes hold of you for another 38 minutes while this album is running and playing. Instrumental open on Speed of Life, and that is a big factor with this record. Most of it, I would say, is instrumental, and even the moments where Bowie does incorporate lyrical structure to a song, there's it's very laconic. It's very trimmed down and very poetic. Sorry if you can hear Hufflepuff barking in the background there. He's kind of going nuts. Breaking Glass is your second song. Get this intermittent bass and electric riff that build in to open this song, and the drums, you got that just that unique tone that remains there. And I love the way that this song finds its groove and gusto with the vocal. It's like Bowie finally starts singing on this record, and you just get this really funky, groovy track. There's this breakdown that's going to find the groove disappear, and then it'll return to that. But a quick minute, 51 seconds, this is a track that I think its brilliance lies in that it really just leaves you begging and wanting for more when it's finished. What in the World is your third track. Drums and in this like Nintendo Core synth effect. This is a pretty wild song. Iggy Pop working on this track as well, doing backing vocals, so I dig that about it. Chorus finds this breezy, urgently up-tempo form, though. Like I really the contrast that's there, the light nature of the instrumentation, but the upbeat tempo, and again the urgency that is created within those melodies, within that composition, really create an interesting dynamic in that track. Sound and Vision is your fourth song, probably the closest that Bowie is getting to. I call it a pop song, call it return to form with previous records that were made in the early to mid 70s. But I really I love the loose nature of this arrangement, the guitars, the bass, and the synths that all just kind of swim around each other, and the tension that builds. I mean, it's almost like a minute and a half that goes by before you actually hear David Bowie sing anything on the song, and it's only a 3-minute track. So I love the tension that's created there with the song. I think it's absolutely brilliant. Always Crashing in the Same Car. This is a fun stretch of songs too. Is your fifth song. Psychedelic doo-wop is what I would use to describe this song. Really very unique flair with the sci-fi synths that work around the arpeggiated guitars, other soaring synth elements that bring in lighter moods. Just great contrast, great dissonance in those sounds, evoking beauty and sadness. Just a wider range of emotions that are coming from that song, and a song that lyrically does go to a dark place. This song is rehashing an incident with David Bowie that he's probably not particularly proud of. So I do like that contrast as well as far as the writing, and it's something that doesn't happen a lot on this record as far as that dynamic between lyrics and a unique contrast with the music because of the mostly instrumental nature of this album. Be My Wife, your sixth song. Got this barroom piano, a bit of heavy guitar that's going to open this thing up. The rhythm section gives this arrangement its heavy feel, I'd argue, and I really I love the bass and the drums and the way they go to work on this track. And this is a song that it feels a bit more familiar to. I feel like Sound and Vision, Be My Wife, as we get to the close of the A side of this record, are songs that find more familiarity as far as that signature Bowie sound versus the avant-garde and experimental nature of what he's exploring in this new album. A New Career in a New Town is your seventh song. Prominent bass drum and light synths that are equally eerie and comforting. Again, I like that contrast. Instrumentation hits about 40 seconds in. Bowie just really mean on the harmonica. I love again another instrumental track that leads into the B-side and kind of acts as a bridge into the more experimental, call it the night side of Low, which is going to lead off with Warsaw. It's the biggest track on this thing, coming in at 6 minutes, 20 seconds. The synths convey this desolate, somber mood. I love the dreary landscape that this song creates, inspired by a trip that Bowie took through Poland, and just felt that what he was seeing was rather desolate. He wanted to recreate the mood, the experience that he felt, and I think he nails it. Love the way that this song does move into lighter, more pleasant territory. Remains formless and co-written with Brian Eno. It's the first of many songs within this trilogy that they would come to pen together. Art Decade is your second song, play on words of Art Decade, which I think that's just Bowie being Bowie. It's absolutely brilliant. The double entendre there, simple electric bass drum and the formless synth landscape. It creates this mood of beauty and sadness. This is a song reflecting on Berlin, that city and its art scene. But I'd say just the art scene in general. I love the play on words, the idea of David doing something that creates something new, creates this foundation for art to move in a different direction, but also creates a track in a way that is it's meant to run counter to the decay of popular music at that time. The idea of pop music and the breezy shift in the 70s sound that so many artists adopted. It just really is another track that highlights his brilliance in a way that really captures his brilliance as a writer from an instrumental standpoint. This is a record that Bowie has always been captivating with his lyrics, with his stories, but he's telling a new tale with Low, and he's doing it without that element, and I just find it fascinating. Weeping Wall is your penultimate track. Love the minimalism with the xylophone, the vibraphone textures that he's working with. Believe Bowie did all the instrumentation on this song. Synths create this ominous unease. So again, that contrast, the creation of elements that don't feel like they fit together, but it makes sense. It makes sense when you think about the human experience and the number of different ways that a certain event can make us feel. Events that transpire in our lives, they're not just black and white. There isn't, just one side or the other. Oftentimes things leave us in this very conflicted gray area, and I think that that's one of the brilliant things about Weeping Wall and about all the tracks on this beat side. And then Subterraneans is your final track. Soaring synths create this mood of hope around swimming, pulsating, eerie synths. Great saxophone component. I love that Bowie shows up with that instrument because he's amazing on it. Working around icy synths, those textures continue to develop on this track. Kind of a cold, somber ending to a record that, the idea of Low there in the title, certainly, the joke, the visual irony of low profile is something that I addressed, and certainly an entertaining element to it. But the idea that Bowie maybe was at his lowest point with the creation of this record, that it took to getting to that place in life, for his art to take that turn, for him personally to realize that, he needed to take that turn if he wanted to hang around. A lot of people call it a low point for his career too. I will go there and highlight that real quick. I think that some of these critics are quite hilarious in their interpretations of this record. But it's the album flows together into a lyrical, hallucinatory, miraculously beautiful whole. The music of an overstimulated mind and an exhausted body as rock's prettiest sex vampire sachets through some serious emotional wreckage. That seems somewhat positive. There's some negative ones that I thought I had pulled up here. But anyways, it's very typical. David Bowie, the type of guy that has always pushed us as far as what music can be, and pushing us to open up our taste, to be more open-minded, to acknowledge and to recognize that music can be so much more than just simply what has been laid before all of us. And so many artists that have continued to build off of that legacy, to build off of that thought process, and music just would not be the same without David Bowie or this record. So with that is your classic wax of the week. I hope you guys enjoy this record. Take some time to check it out, and stay tuned throughout the week for more album reviews. Got Ringo Starr review coming at you right here in just a few moments. But until then, take care of one another, and we'll see you next time on Classic Wax.